Part 5 starts with desire outwitting Mother Nature. So, what I liked about this part, and I think that's where I'm going to put it at, is where Napoleon Hill actually gives us his own personal story about desire. But then it's not in terms of riches. It's like I said, desire is applicable in every area of your life, and it doesn't have to begin and end with money. Some things money can't buy. Some say happiness, others say health. What about hearing? So he had a son who was born without any physical sign of ears, and he asked the doctor what he thought of that, and the doctor told him, hey, think your son is going to be deaf and mute for life. But he couldn't accept that opinion, and he was like, yeah, I have every right to, because this is my son and I want the best for him. So he didn't tell anyone that he disagreed with the doctor's opinion, but he had determined quietly in his heart that, hey, that's what this guy thinks, that's not what I think, and that's not what is going to happen. My son is going to hear. So a quote that really inspired him was by Emerson, and it reads, "The only course of things goes to teach us faith. We need only obey. There is guidance for each of us, and by lowly listening, we shall hear the right word." Wow, how powerful is that? Words to live by, really. The only course of things goes to teach us faith. We need only obey. There is guidance for each of us, and by lowly listening, we shall hear the right word. The importance of meditation, y'all. I can't even stress it. So the word that Napoleon heard was desire, but in this case, it was desire that his son should hear. And it wasn't just like passive desire. He had concocted a plan on how he would get his son to hear. And so what he did was that he just waited and waited until his son, developed, and just to watch his behavior. And as his son was developing, there were signs that, oh yeah, this dude can hear partially. And that was all he needed to kick his secret plan into motion to help his son hear. So, which leads us to the next chapter, which is next subtitle, which is an accident that changed a life. So, him and his wife had purchased a thing called a phonograph. Google it, baby. And when they played a record, like I said, like the son could partially hear, but then he was like so excited, right? And he was so excited that he played a record over and over for 2 hours with his teeth clamped on the edge of the case. So apparently there's a principle of bone conduction of sound, and like some people can hear some sounds through that. I have no information. I'm not well versed in this thing, so you guys can look it up, but I'm sure you can grasp what he's trying to say. So, and then he found out that by talking, the son could hear a bit more clearly, but when he talked. Sorry, just hold on 1 second. Yeah, so he said that he discovered that his son could hear him quite clearly when he spoke with his lips touching his mastoid bone at the base of his skull. So he was just like, he was really determined, like, to get his son to hear and everything. So he started, like, creating stories during bedtime because his son loved hearing bedtime stories. And so he created these stories to develop in him self-reliance, imagination, and a keen desire to hear and be normal. So what I love about that is that, he didn't want his son, one, having low self-esteem or having pity on himself or thinking he was less than just because he couldn't hear. He was just like, he wanted his son to believe that he could do anything in spite of his hearing disability. In fact, like, when you read this chapter, you realize that they really worked really hard to have the opposite effect on him with how they encouraged him to grow. They didn't encourage him, or rather, they didn't hold him back because of his physical I don't want to call it a disability, but because of his condition, they didn't want to make him, have that woe is me mantra. But they were like, they wanted to do the opposite. So they encouraged him and they were like, okay, you're special because of this, and like great things will happen to you because of this. People will favor you because of this. Reverse psychology, I guess, right? Is that reverse psychology? Anyhow, so then he recounts such an awesome story in the next subtitle, which is he won a new world with Sixth Sense. And this story reminds me why I love children. So he talks about how he grew up, and then like how they had paper routes, and at a certain age you could have one. And his son's older brother, had a paper route, but then when he wanted to do one, his mom disagreed with his mom turned him down, but he was like super determined, right? So he just decided, you know what, I'm gonna do what I want to do. So he 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 jumped out the window, and then he went and bargained with someone. Like, I don't know if it's a neighbor, but it was an old man, and he was like, okay, give me 6 cents, let me borrow 6 cents from you, I'll return it. But so he took that 6 cents and bought his newspapers. He did his paper route, and he was able to pay the old man back, and he had made money. He made a profit, 42 cents. So he came back in the house, and he went to bed holding his money. And his parents found him asleep with his money in his hand, and his mom started crying. But she was crying just because she's like, oh my God, look at this here now, boy. He risked his life and he can't even hear that well, and he was out and about in the streets, just busy gallivanting. But the dad was so happy. He laughed so hard. He was so proud of his son, and he was like, he saw a brave, ambitious, self-reliant little businessman whose stock in himself had been increased 100% because he had gone into business on his own initiative and had won. It's so different. And I know as moms, we care so much about our kids, but sometimes we can end up holding them back. And that's the thing about children. Children, if you don't put out their light, will teach you so many things about bravery, about courage, about resilience, about patience, about forgiveness. So just let them be. And that meant so much to me because I'm a mother and I want to protect my children at all times and at all costs. And sometimes I'm like, but is the cost their growth? So I have to stop being kind of like a helicopter mom and just let them be, because I don't know who they're going to be and I don't know who they're going to show me. But so far I'm learning so much about them, and I know every parent like brags about their kids, but I have wonderful things to say about mine. In my heart, of course. So then the little boy, deaf boy who heard, is the next subtitle. And it talks about how he had struggles in school because of his hearing impairment, and how like they refused to teach him sign language. They didn't take him to a school for the hard of hearing. They took him to a regular school, and there were issues with like the school officials, and there were so many disappointments, I think, with technology at the time. And so he went through his school just having to shout, or having people to shout so that he can even hear them a little bit, So he recounts how the last week of his son's college, he reluctantly tried a hearing aid that was offered to him on trial, and it worked. And the first thing that he did was call his mom, and he heard his mom's voice clearly for the first time. It's like those YouTube videos, like, that you watch. Some of them that melt my heart are those ones where like a newborn kid is given like a hearing aid and they hear their mom's voice and they just start crying because it's so beautiful. Oh my God, I can't even. So it was just the beginning for like him, He didn't even know what was in store for him, but great things were in store for him. Which leads us to the next subtitle, which is thoughts, the thought that works miracles. So after this whole discovery, he was so excited and enthusiastic. He wrote back to the manufacturer with like rave reviews about his whole experience. And he ended up getting invited to New York to tour the factory. And while he was there, he was struck by an idea, a thought, or an inspiration, which ended up turning his affliction into an asset. And this is how it happened. So, for one month, he just researched extensively about the entire marketing system of the manufacturer, and he wanted to create new ways to communicate with the rest of the hard of the hearing community globally. And so he wrote down like a 2-year plan, and he presented this idea to the manufacturer, and then he was successful in that goal and he accomplished it. So not only was he recruited and employed by this company which gave him the ability to hear, he gained riches from collaborating with the manufacturer, and even more important to him, he was able to give joy to people who he could relate to, people who were hard of hearing and were probably struggling or suffering, and he brought change in their lives. He brought joy and he gave them hope by introducing that device to them, and a lot of people have benefited from that idea, that thought that he had, miracles to people who probably didn't even know that such a thing existed. So it was awesome. And I loved that whole story. So a line that summarizes what I've just said is a burning desire has devious ways of transmuting itself into its physical equivalent. I I need say less. And how I'm going to end this is mental chemistry works magic. So there is this paragraph from an article about Madame Schumann Heink, who was, I think, a very famous opera singer. And it recounts her story of how she went to visit the director of the Vienna Court Opera to have him test her voice. So the quote, rather, or the paragraph, is not so much from the woman, but more so the director's erroneous judgment of her. So he doesn't test her voice, but instead, with one look at the awkward and poorly dressed girl, he said, "With such a face and with no personality at all, how can you ever expect to succeed in opera? My good child, give up the idea. Buy a sewing machine and go to work. You can never be a singer." And I was just like, what? I couldn't even wrap my head around this because it's so familiar now. Take whatever situation you can be in. It can be, like in someone who wants to be a model and they're not that tall, or they don't have the typical model body weight. They have, let's say, a different condition such as maybe vitiligo or something like that. Odds stacked against them. People have been turned down and their appearance has been used against them just because they don't fit the mold that has been accepted for such a long time. And like they end up being so wrong because they end up turning down people who are perfect for the job, people who are trailblazers in the industry. And so was this woman. She ended up being a fantastic singer, and I think I'll look her up just to see her work. Another example he gives is this guy who was a business associate of his, and he fell ill, and he was at the hospital, and he was supposed to, no, he had like to be rushed to the operating room, and then the doctor was like, "Listen, I don't think this guy is gonna make it, so I hope you said your goodbyes." And and this business associate said to Napoleon, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll be out in no time." And so the operation is over, and then he's wheeled out, and everyone is shocked. And the nurse is like, "Let me tell you something. Nothing other than this man's desire to live could have brought him alive and out of the operating room." So the moral of this story is you have to believe in yourself despite what others might say, even people who are professionals. Look at this doctor, for example. Look at the story of the director. People who you trust to have expert opinion, vision, sometimes if you rely on their opinion, it might be to your own demise or to your own detriment. So you have to believe in yourself more than you believe in others' opinion about you. I don't have any stories to give or say because I can't remember. And right now it's a little bit late, and like as I said, I have brain fog. but I would really love to hear you guys' story in the comment section. What have you been told before that you can't do this because of this, and then you rebelled and you believed in yourself? You rebelled because you believed in yourself and you did it, and people were like completely shocked. So I haven't watched Genius, the Kanye West documentary on Netflix, but I keep seeing this thing on YouTube where he's accepting a Grammy, and he's like, a lot of people want to ask me. No, I know tonight people are wondering what I'll be doing after I've won this award, and they think that I'll be going crazy, popping champagne and doing all this. And I know a lot of people will be asking, what will he be doing? What would he be doing if he never won? You know? And then he just looks at the crowd and is like, I guess we'll never know. And the point is, go watch it. And the second point is, what he was trying to say is like, a lot of people didn't believe in him. A lot of people don't think he deserves that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because he believes in himself and he wins. He wins in the way. So do yourself a favor. Do yourself a favor. Believe in yourself so that you can win. And people, including yourself, will never know what would happen if you didn't win because you won. I feel like I should leave it there, but it would be incomplete if I didn't say this. Through some strange and powerful principle of mental chemistry, which she has never divulged, nature wraps in the impulse of strong desire that something which recognizes no such word as impossible and accepts no such reality as failure. I guess we'll never know. See you guys at the next one, man. This was fun.
Subscribe.